The World Public Forum has just met on the Greek island of Rhodes to hold its annual Dialogue of Civilisations. This year, the theme is Preventing World War and Learning from the Last 100 Years. The event has been held every autumn since 2003 and brings together public figures, academics, statesmen, religious figures and leading businessmen from all over the world. The main plenary session had the title World Order and the Politics of Regime Change. One of the main speakers was John Lautland of the French Institute of Democracy and Cooperation, who spoke about non-interventionism.
Putin's actions are exaggerated. They are exaggerated. In fact, I would say that the Western analysis of Ukraine is severely deformed by this obsession that I think the Western media has with the person of Vladimir Putin. In all my interviews about Ukraine, I have always emphasized that what happens in Ukraine, what has been happening in Ukraine, is the result of what has been happening in Ukraine. In other words, the breakup of the Ukrainian state, which is presented in our media as the annexation by Mr. Putin of a sovereign territory. It's not. It's the breakup of a state, just as in 1991 Yugoslavia broke up because Slovenia and Croatia wanted to leave it, so Ukraine broke up in 2014 because Crimea wanted to leave it. That is the reality. The illegal seizure of power in February by the current regime in Kiev precipitated a chain reaction, as I predicted at the time. I argued before, long before, back in December, that there should be strict respect for the constitutional order in Ukraine. Instead, there was mass violation of it. There was a coup. And Ukraine was always a weak state, and of course now it's completely collapsed as a result.
David Hoyle from Great Britain talked about the International Criminal Court.
I think, unfortunately, in its most recent manifestation, the attempt to bring the ICC, or the International Criminal Court, into being, once again has been surrounded, mired in controversy. And I think for many people and many countries, especially in the emergent world, the ICC has been seen as yet another sort of instrument of foreign policy used by the European Union or the USA, as exactly that. And that's one of our difficulties, which I think also has been discussed at this conference. So I think you do now live, one way or the other, in a multipolar world. The USA, I think, in many ways is actually in decline, certainly in reputational issues. The EU, of course, is trying to actually also position itself now as a world power. But you have, countries like Brazil, like Russia, like China, like India, who are moving into a vacuum. There's a vacuum at this moment in time. And the concept of a world policeman now, it's a very old-fashioned one.
We have two international crises at the moment, Iraq and Ukraine. Do you think coming to a conference like this and talking about it can do any good? Can it be of any help?
I think it can. I mean, the more dialogue, I think, in general, the better. War is always far better than war. Obviously, there will be circumstances and times when conflict is actually unavoidable. But I think the more discussion you have, the better. And a forum like this, I think, actually helps to bring people together and break down preconceptions and barriers, which I think often do fuel conflicts, so internationally and now even on the European continent. Once again, we have the spectre of war, the spectre of conflict in Ukraine, which you may well have NATO forces actually moved into the area. It's a very, very dangerous sign for us. So the more people actually discuss options, look at new ways of actually solving what's happening in Ukraine, it's a far, far better situation.
The president of this conference, Mr. Yakunin, who's the head of Russian Railways, a friend of Mr. Putin's, and he's been put on the blacklist. Do you think that serves any useful purpose?
I think none whatsoever. All it does is actually polarize issues even more. When you have, in effect, a European foreign policy which actually comprises of policy by blacklisting, well, that's not a foreign policy. That's a very, very knee-jerk reaction to events in Ukraine. For example, in Ukraine, the events there, I'm even looking at it from the outside as a reasonably well-informed observer, incredibly difficult to work out exactly what's happening. I don't think the Western media know. I don't even necessarily think the Russian media know. To base your policy then on a sort of a partial picture of what's happening in that country, very, very dangerous. And when it becomes, a matter of blacklisting individuals who happen to be friends of the Russian president, that's not the basis for good foreign policy. That's the basis actually to make things even worse, I think, even more polarized.
The founding president of the forum is Vladimir Yakunin, who is president of Russian Railways. What did he hope the forum would achieve?
My best wish is that every one of 400 participants going back to their countries, either Great Britain, either United States, either Russia, Ukraine, or anywhere, they will deliver to the society in appropriate way the results of this conference, introduce the ideas how to keep the world sustainable, in sustainable peace, how to consider some of the most hard issues of contemporary world, how to understand that different does not mean enemy. And finally, I hope that as from the nucleus, those people who will initiate in other organizations, in other activities, in other conferences where we will be invited to participate,